All right, we're live. Hello, everybody. You guys hear us on the chat? If you guys hear us on the chat, drop us a line and say that you hear us. I'm here with Peter Lavelle and Alexander Mercouris.
Okay, this is a quick sound check. I hope everyone can hear me.
And I hope everyone can hear me. Hello, everybody.
All right, it looks like everyone hears us. AJ says he hears us fine. Alex says he hears us fine. Iru, very good. All right, let's start it up. Peter Lavelle, host of RT's Crosstalk, and Alexander Mercouris, editor-in-chief of the Duran. Welcome to the Duran Live. This is our fourth live that we're doing. And thank you, everybody, for joining us on this live stream. Guys, you can always send us a super chat. We appreciate it, and we will try to answer the super chats as quickly as possible. And we also try to answer all your questions on this live chat as well. And you can always visit our PayPal. It's in the descriptions that we have on all our videos to donate to the Duran so we can keep on broadcasting to you. And you can visit the Duran shop. You can pick up a t-shirt. That also helps us out. And the t-shirts are really, really cool. Good fit, really comfortable. So let's start it up. Alexander and Peter, thank you very much for another marathon live stream. Let's see how long we go this time around. And we are taking questions from everyone that's in the chat right now. We have 130 viewers already. We are off to a good start. So guys, send us your questions. Alexander and Peter will try to answer them as best as possible. And you guys, let's kick things off with Manafort. And of course, we'll kick it off with Trump. What else? What else? And so let's start off, Alexander. What do you think about Manafort's? I don't know if I should say a plea deal or, okay, we're talking about it. He's not going to flip. But what do you think about it?
It's a plea bargain. It's a classic plea bargain. He's pleaded guilty to two actually very nebulous charges. I mean, I'm still not clear what conspiring against the United States is. I mean, this is completely mysterious charge that he's pleaded guilty to. He's in return going to get a reduced sentence. He's probably going to get a reduced sentence on his other case also. And at the same time, he's agreed to cooperate with Mueller. But the cooperation that he's going to provide to Mueller, I suspect, is going to be very limited. We saw this with Flynn. We saw this with Papadopoulos. Everybody was expecting that all kinds of revelations were going to come out of the plea deals that Flynn and Papadopoulos did with Mueller. And absolutely nothing came out. There was nothing at all. And I predict the same thing is going to happen with Manafort.
What I think is very interesting. Yeah, what I think is very interesting here is that I think Mueller, I think we all would agree. I mean, if there was some smoking gun, it would have already been leaked. People would know about it, okay? I mean, Peter Strzok and Lisa Page and all those other clowns would have leaked it to the media, okay? What I think is interesting with this plea bargaining with Mueller is that I think it's interesting if you read very closely other names that have been mentioned in this report. The Podesta name popped up, and I think Mueller. This is my gut, okay? My gut is that a couple other people on the other side of the aisle are going to get stung by Mueller, so Mueller can say, "Well, it was fair." You know, I looked at every angle and all of that. It'll be kind of like, you know, the Clinton scandal. You know, it was not an investigation, it was a matter. So they're going to play with words here. And, you know, Mueller's going to say through this web here, because it's Ukraine. This is where Manafort and the Podestas, you know, they dance together. And so I think that just as some kind of token, Mueller is going to pinch someone, you know, very gently. Because if you're going to, you know, criticize Manafort for being a foreign agent, well, almost everybody and their grandmother inside the Beltway is a foreign agent by that definition. But I think it's interesting is that it's, I think Mueller's definitely winding down. And I think with the Bob Woodward book and the anonymous nonsense at the New York Times, how dreadful. I mean, what journalistic standard is that, okay? You know, I think it was written by a group of people. I don't think it was written by one single individual. I absolutely believe the New York Times was probably heavily involved in editing. This more collusion but from somewhere else, all right? And basically what they're doing as we go down to the midterms is they're pushing the 25th Amendment to remove Trump. Just real quickly, folks, you know, Trump is uncouth. He can be very rude. He can be very rough. He can be very annoying. He can be a narcissist. I could go on and on, but it's not illegal. Okay? Yeah. Sorry. Being rude doesn't mean you're unfit to be president of the United States. Look at Dianne Feinstein, the senator from my state with Kavanaugh. That is a disgrace. She should resign. That is disgraceful behavior from a very senior member of Congress. Disgraceful behavior. Everyone's grasping at straws. The 25th Amendment is basically, if the president of the United States is incapacitated, had a stroke, you know, cannot be revived. I mean serious stuff here. Not that, you know, he has 2 scoops of ice cream and everybody else has 1. Okay? You can't impeach the guy for that. You can't remove the guy for that.
I agree with that.
Peter, someone's asking about Podesta. What's going on with Podestas? We know about the immunity. Anything else?
Can you spell money bags? Clinton money bags? Okay. I mean, geez, these people were, I mean, their relationship with the Clinton Foundation. I mean, what they do is, I like the British term for a vacuum cleaner, Hoover. I think that's, but they, you know, the Podestas mean hoovering up money, okay, for the Clintons. Okay. They've got more corrupt. They're up to their, no, they're so corrupt they disbanded. Okay. Oh, nothing to see here. No books to look at here. We're not actually a functioning entity anymore. It's no coincidence the most powerful lobbying group in Washington, D.C. suddenly shuts down because they had a relationship with Paul Manafort. Come on. The mainstream media doesn't want to report all these obvious facts in the public domain.
Yeah, that is true. Before we get to Syria, guys, there's a lot of questions on Syria. We're going to get to Syria. Alexander, users want to know what's going on with Brexit.
What is going on with Brexit? Well, I mean, we've discussed this before. A government that's falling apart, a prime minister who's lost her way, a political establishment that's trying to find every conceivable way to stop Brexit that it can, and some people who take the whole Brexit thing very seriously and want it to happen, who include perhaps half the population of the country. So we have a political crisis in Britain, which is getting bigger and bigger. Now, there is going to be Brexit. I am sure of it. What the terms of that Brexit are going to be, God knows. But the kind of Brexit that we might get might be a pale imitation of the real thing. That, I'm afraid, is the view I have.
Yeah, I think Theresa May is going to flee to Brussels and have the British government in exile. Okay. And there's not going to be any kind of, you know, raid on Entebbe to save her. Okay, God, just take them all and go.
Peter, if
the European Parliament, you know, no one ever goes. Camp out there.
If Theresa May tried to organise a raid on Entebbe, it would be a botch. It would be a total debacle. I mean, we have a government that is so dysfunctional at the moment. It isn't governing. A prime minister isn't governing. I mean, that is the reality of it. And a negotiation that has completely fallen apart. We're not talking about negotiations anymore. We're talking about the British establishment having a nervous breakdown, quarrelling with each other, and a prime minister who really isn't a prime minister in any true sense.
That's why Boris Johnson stays in the news, to keep everybody laughing.
Absolutely. He very much wants to be prime minister. God knows why anybody would want him to be prime minister, but believe it or not, and I am absolutely shocked to say this, there is actually some people who say better Boris than May. And
well,
who knows? Perhaps we might get him.
Boris, we get Boris, then Wales will leave, Scotland will leave, Northern Ireland will leave. Okay, I mean they're going to be stuck with a few. It's going to be very much like Mikhail Gorbachev. You know, he was the general secretary of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, a global superpower, and by the time he was done, he was stuck with a little office with a few shoe boxes full of his notes. Done.
Done. Yeah.
All right. Well, since we're talking about people leaving, we had some news with Orban and the EU this last week, and people are asking what's going on with Hungary and the EU. We got a couple of questions here. Do you think the EU is doomed? And what do you think Hungary should be doing? Are we looking at how would we say it, a Hun exit?
Well, no, well, first of all, if the EU continues on this path, picking on people like Hungary, countries like Hungary, in that kind of way, then it is doomed, because people in Hungary are not going to stand for it. People in Poland are not going to stand for it. People in Italy are not going to stand for it. It cannot enforce its will in that way without provoking a massive reaction. So is it doomed? If it continues like that, it is doomed. Now, I think what they have done with what the European Parliament and the European bureaucracy are trying to do with Orban and with Hungary is absolutely wrong. It is wrong at so many levels. It is wrong in principle, because I mean, he's simply expressing opposition to a policy that is being imposed on Hungary that the Hungarian people never agreed with and don't want. And that is wrong already in what is supposed to be, let us remember, not a state, but a combination of states. I mean, you know, that is wrong at that level, but it is politically so misconceived. Peter, I think you want to say something.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that there's some interesting principles in play here. First of all, the principle of democracy. Orban is very popular. Okay, I mean, he's democratically elected.
He is overwhelmingly popular in Hungary. I mean, his election was overwhelming. Go on.
And the other issue is that this is a huge challenge for the European Union over the issue of sovereignty. Hungary is now an exemplar of this. They don't know how to deal with it, because you always had all of these liberal consensus people, you know, and separated from the grassroots, and it's this elite club which you're not a member of, and they decide everything above everyone else. They use democracy as some kind of icing around the cake to make it look real pretty and tasty, but they don't want democracy. They're afraid of democracy. They loathe democracy. You know, every time there was a referendum on the European Union and it failed, they just had another one until the folks got it right, until they voted the right way. The Hungarians are saying, there's a lot of principles at issues here. We're not going to sacrifice our democracy for your conception of fading sovereignty.
Alexander, what's going on with Julian Assange?
What is going on with Julian Assange? Well, he's still in the Ecuadorian embassy. His health is deteriorating. Very sorry to say this, Britain, this bastion of the rule of law and of human rights, is behaving appallingly. It is shocking the way he is being treated by the British authorities. The case against him in Sweden, which never had any reality, in my opinion, and not just in my opinion, lots of legal scholars, including British legal scholars, said that there was no reality to that case in Sweden. That case has collapsed, and yet we still have the British authorities threatening to arrest him if he leaves the embassy. And of course, his health in the embassy is collapsing. And the UN has already said that what was done to him violates his human rights as a refugee, and the British are doing nothing about it. I'm very concerned about Assange. I'm very concerned about what it says about Britain. I'm very concerned about what it says about the judiciary in Britain and the way they have behaved. And I am absolutely, completely shocked by the way the entire political class in Britain, including the media, have ganged up on this man in the most terrible way.
Including the media. Look, you guys, Julian Assange is not going to be given one breath to breathe as long as Donald Trump is in the White House, because if he is given a public forum and he is asked under oath, he might tell you the real story about Hillary Clinton's emails, a story official Washington doesn't want to hear, because that would unravel everything else that has been going on with Russia, Russia, Russia. Okay, he's the one that knows the truth, and the British and American authorities will be merciless. We remember when he got asylum. You know, the number of people. Alex, you have a better memory than I do. We should kill him. We should. What did Hillary Clinton say? Can't we drug him? I mean, serious. These are government officials talking about murder.
Quite. Absolutely. I remember it all very well. And I have to say, also, the way the whole sex rape thing was used to discredit him and to trash his reputation, and the ease with which that worked, that was really shocking and so ugly and so bad. Let's face it, if he had been somebody who'd say done something like this in China, and the Chinese authorities had been behaved like this, well, I mean, you can imagine the kind of campaigns that the British and American governments would be orchestrating on his behalf. This is far worse than anything I have seen anywhere else in the world at the moment, and it is happening in Britain. And as a British citizen, I'm very ashamed of it.
And it's a disgrace that journalists won't rise up and speak with a single voice on this travesty. It's a
travesty, given that, let's face it, he is a journalist. I mean, they used his work, The Guardian published his work, and they betrayed him completely. And I have to say, it was a revelation to me. It explained an awful lot about the kind of media we have in Britain when I saw it working that way.
All right. Well, we're approaching 400 people. We're at 370, guys. Thank you for joining us. Antonia Kinsley says everyone needs to donate $1 or more to the Duran. Yes, they do. Guys, send us a super chat, and we'll try to answer those super chats and keep the questions coming. Let's move over to Syria. A lot of questions on Syria. Peter, progress on Idlib. Will Russia back down if things escalate? And what is Putin doing behind the scenes?
Well, first of all, what is Putin doing behind the scenes? He's doing what he does best. Talk to everybody. Everybody that's willing to listen, and anyone that's willing to talk. I think right now the Russians working and convincing hard the Syrian government is these evacuation points. Okay, I think that's what they wanted. They've done it before, and it's good. It's working quietly behind the scenes. This is how Russian diplomacy works. They're not full of hyperbole and beating their chest. It's not Khrushchev with a shoe at the UN. Okay, it's a lot. Putin's working the phones. Okay. But the offensive will go forward. The real question for everybody watching this is, how badly is Turkey going to fare through all of this? Because they have got themselves painted themselves into a horrific corner. And so the Russians, and I knew this all along, all of us did, dealing with Erdogan is like a troubled child sometimes, okay? Because he wants everything at once. He's like in a candy store. I want this, I want this, and I want this. And everyone's basically saying, you can have one. Now let's work on it. Okay. So this is what's I don't think that there's going to be an all-out assault, and I don't think there's like a calendar day in an hour, because right now the suburbs are being cleared very slowly without a lot of fanfare, and basically it's going to be somehow negotiating to get these terrorists out. The problem is Turkey, because the only place these terrorists can go is Turkey, and that's Erdogan's greatest nightmare. He's perfectly willing to fund and support and arm and give equipment to terrorists in Idlib, but he doesn't want those same folks in his own country because they'll wreak havoc, because he turned on them. Okay, this is a catastrophic mess.
Alexander.
Yeah, can I just say, I've actually heard, I saw on Interfax just a few hours ago that Erdogan is going to Sochi and will be meeting Putin there. So all the negotiations that Peter is talking about are actually on the go, and they're going on all the time. The Russians, as Peter says, talk to everybody, and they're not going to be provoked into attacking Idlib or green lighting an attack on Idlib before they're ready. I mean, everything that Peter said about the need to help the Turks out of this situation is absolutely right. The Turks have got themselves into an awful mess. They have all these violent people in Idlib, nowhere for them to go. But there is something else which the Russians understand very well about diplomacy, which the US and the Western powers have long ago forgotten, which is that the way you succeed is by helping the other guy keep faith. They're going to try and find a way to make it seem as if Idlib is going to be secured with Turkey's help, with Erdogan's cooperation, even if that is not true, because they understand that that is vital to keep Turkey and the Turkish people and the Turkish government and the Turkish army on side. So they will work this thing very carefully. But look at what has been happening to Syria over the last 3 years. Every time the Russians negotiate, in the end, they win. They won completely just a few weeks ago in southwest Syria, where it was cleared without hardly a shot being fired. And how did they do that? Well, they negotiated with Israel. And they're doing the same now with the Turks over at Idlib. But the result will be the same. It will be the Syrian government back in control of Idlib. That will be the end outcome. How it's achieved, it will take a little time, but we will get there.
Before I get to Peter,
on top of that, just real quick here, it looks like the fairy tale known as the White Helmets is coming to an end. Okay, they're being exposed as for the frauds that they are. Okay. Netflix or whoever it was, shame on you.
Yeah, well, quite.
Netflix, George Clooney, all these guys that supported them.
Well,
shame.
There it is. Shame. Okay, before we get to another question on Idlib, a real quick question. Gabriel Shalom says, Peter, I have some wooden handmade bow ties, and they are in Moscow City. If interested, please say it.
Okay, go ahead.
And the same user said that he would like to donate 30 pounds to us. How can I donate? You can donate to our PayPal. It's in the description. We have a link for that as well. Thank you very much. Real quick question while we're on Idlib to close it out. Will Idlib be partitioned?
No, I don't think it will be partitioned. I mean, Turkey, I know some people are talking about Turkey annexing Idlib. Why would Turkey want to annex Idlib or any part of it? Why would it want to have this enclave there in northwest Syria existing all the time? I know people have made comparisons with northern Cyprus, but I don't really think, I've thought about this, I don't think this really works. Idlib is a headache for everybody. And
also,
Idlib
is also a bargaining chip. It's a bargaining chip. See, really what the Turks, Erdogan is most concerned with are the Kurds, okay?
Exactly.
Now, he wants Idlib as some kind of bargaining chip to get his outcome on the border, okay? And the question was, will Idlib be partitioned? No, but Syria is in the process of being partitioned by the U.S. by its illegal occupation in the country. Remember what Ignatius said, the Washington Post was told by a senior official, John Bolton, that the Americans want to. That's what I assume. Just keep creating quagmires. That's a high-level official saying that's what U.S. policy is towards Syria, to maintain a quagmire.
All right, we got some super chats. Neil Gardner gave us £2. I like your analysis and style. Thank you, Neil. Debbie Coleman gave us super chat £5. Peter, hi guys, thanks for the stream. Is Trump really draining the swamp, and will this have an effect on the UK? And Peter, then Alexander, since it's about Trump and the UK.
No, the interesting thing, Trump's keel during his entire presidency, other than Twitter, I can go both ways on Twitter. He has a human resources problem. See, he doesn't have real loyalists there. I mean, because he's an outsider. He hasn't been in the game for 20, 30, 40 years, and he can, tap this person, tap that person for cushy jobs and stuff like that. These people are not loyalists to Donald Trump. Even though I think maybe some are committed to his ideas or his vision. If someone knows what that is, please tell me. But no, he's not draining the swamp. Unfortunately, to keep himself in power, he needs elements of the swamp. That's really kind of the tragedy. of the Trump presidency. He can't function without them. And when they have the opportunity, they try to outmaneuver him. You know, future historians will tell us there's chaos in the White House, but not the way Woodward and Bernstein would like us to know. It's very different. That he has a huge loyalty problem.
Alexander.
Peter is absolutely right. If he's going to drain the swamp, he needs to get control of the Justice Department and the FBI. Unless he puts people in charge, unless he gets an attorney general who's prepared to work for him, well, you know, Giuliani or someone like that. Giuliani, remember, was a very, very powerful prosecutor. Somebody like that in charge of the department and the FBI, he can't do it. But if that were ever to happen and we saw the swamp being drained in Washington, the question about the UK becomes pertinent, because believe me, the British are right in that. They will be horrified if the swamp in Washington starts getting drained, because it will bring out all sorts of ugly things in London also. I mean, we've discussed this many times in live chats and in programs about how deeply the British have been involved in getting the whole Russiagate thing off the ground, and this is really going to come back on them if it's ever investigated properly.
All right, we're closing in on over 450, closing in on 500 viewers. A lot of activity going on. Thank you guys for joining us. Thanks for the super chats as well. We got some more super chats to answer from Farkis. Peter, is it €5 super chat? Is it coincidence that the Frankfurt School was 100% Jewish?
I don't look at the Frankfurt School through that prism at all. I mean, if you look at the cultural milieu of Central Europe, Germany and Central Europe at the time, for the most part, all of them are atheists, number one, okay? They don't have any tie to Judaism whatsoever, maybe some traditions. I don't look at it from that angle. I look at it from a purely ideological one. Did the fact that they were Jewish, did that attract other Jews? Possibly. But I think that, you know, in focusing on that issue just misses the point. It misses the point on, and first of all, I know when I was in graduate school, I read a lot about the Frankfurt School, okay? I think some of their tools of analysis were really quite brilliant, but I don't like it being used as a weapon. That's my problem with the Frankfurt School, all right? So the influence they had was really minor in Europe, but they became, you know, part and parcel of the political establishment on the left, and I would say that they didn't play the most positive role at all, because the thing is that what the Frankfurt School understood more than anyone else at the time is that if you want to affect political change, you go through the culture. See, everybody thought it was the trade unions, okay, and we could grab onto this party and, you know, hang on to the working class. No, those are not assets for the Frankfurt School. The Frankfurt School is much more insidious. They look at culture, and it's not that they had. It's really quite amazing that these members of the Frankfurt School that left Nazi Germany and occupied Europe to preserve their freedom and liberty, they go to the United States and actually concoct an ideology to deprive everybody of their liberty. It's really quite astounding when you think about it.
Yeah, incredible. We have another super chat from Turbo Jones, $5. Alexander, does the executive order permit Trump to sanction Chinese oligarchs? Could that be his real target?
Well, possibly. And Donald Trump does have an issue with China, and he does seem to be focusing very heavily on China. All I'm going to say is probably it does. I mean, executive orders can give the president enormous powers, and I doubt it will be challenged legally. So yes, perhaps he will start sanctioning Chinese oligarchs. But let's be absolutely clear, if he starts going down that road, it is going to make a huge effect in China. We are going to see a situation between the US and China, which is already getting very bad, with tariffs. If the US starts imposing sanctions on Chinese business people, and let's not call them oligarchs, business people, the reaction in Beijing is going to be absolutely furious, and they will retaliate. And that's not going to be a pretty sight at all. It's going to be a very bloody, lots of blood on the carpet.
Don't dismiss the possibility that this is Trump's negotiating strategy, because the last round of talks they had nothing came of them. Okay, deadlock. And so it's his idea of the art of the deal. I'm not saying I agree with what he's doing, but I think this is part of his strategy. And there's no guarantee it's going to work.
No, there's no guarantee. And can I just quickly say, I'm not sure that's the right strategy to follow with China, because the Chinese, we never forget this, it's a culture where a losing face and backing down in that kind of way is very difficult. They will certainly deal with you, and they will always happily deal, and they believe in give and take. And if you approach them in a reasonable way, you're far more likely, to my mind, to get by with them than by going for right out confrontation. So if that is Trump's strategy, I'm sure it's the wrong one.
All right.
We go back to culture again. If you can find the right cultural medium, you might be able to find something. But, you know, assaulting individuals and humiliating them and damaging their wealth and fortunes is not probably the best way to do it.
Yes. Another super chat for £1.99 from Antonia Kinsley. Peter, Netherlands White Helmets, alleged funding has been ceased?
Yes. After an investigation, they don't know where the money's going, whose pockets are being lined. It's an audit, and they said, you know, they don't believe the whole process. And there are others in Europe that are uneasy about this because there's no transparency whatsoever. And again, this is another breach that is getting wider and wider, that's separating the Europeans from the Americans. So this is a really serious move, because it shines sunshine on this very group that lacks transparency and is ideologically motivated. All right, why do they always work in areas where Al Qaeda is? Come on, somebody explain that to me. Okay, if they're these good Samaritans, why do they need the protection of terrorists?
Yeah. And how can you have transparency in areas which are controlled by Al Qaeda and where Western journalists cannot go? How can you know what they're spending? I mean, the whole thing was so strange and so crazy right from the beginning. But there we go.
Alexander, I'll stay with you. Another super chat for £1.99 from Peace and Love. Is Trump in control of Syria policy?
Well, no, he clearly isn't, because, I mean, just a short while ago, he was saying that he wanted to see US troops withdrawn from Syria. And then a few weeks later, what do we get? We get people like possibly John Bolton talking about, you know, US troops staying in Syria and trying to create a quagmire for everybody else. So he is not in full control of Syrian policy. He's not, I think, in full control of lots of areas of policy. And it is a shame, because when Putin and Trump met in Helsinki in that ill-starred summit of a few weeks ago, found a lot of common ground on Syria. And one wishes that the two men were left to sort it out. But it seems it's not going to happen. And with the November elections coming, I think that Trump, his priority at the moment isn't Syria. And so he's deferring to people like Bolton. And it's a great shame.
All right, Peter, before I get to you real quick, another super chat for €5 from Boundless Energy, no question. And another super chat from Ashley Van Dyke, $5, no question. Thank you for the super chats, guys. We appreciate it. Peter, a lot of people want to know, we've answered this before, but let's go through it again. Midterms are coming up. Alexander said it, red wave or blue wave?
You know, kind of preface my answer here. It was those clowns in the polling agencies of 2016 that screwed everything up for everybody. I mean, do we trust them now? I mean, from what I hear, the generic vote, it's like almost like 19% in favor of the Democrats. I think that they will. It's very possible that they will lose the House. I don't think they're going to lose the Senate. That will be a recipe for just deadlock for the next 2 years. Nothing will be done. I mean, the only thing they'll probably agree on is not to shut down the government. This would be catastrophic. I worry about it because the neocons that Trump has allowed around him, they're going to be talking Syria, Venezuela. You know, they're not going to be involved in this the everyday policy of Congress. This is their opportunity while everybody's squabbling. They're going to be doing their nasty stuff. So I don't know. I mean, you know, Trump is out on the stump. I mean, he goes from one barn burner to the next. I mean, he's got a core constituency out there. Can he translate that electorally? We may be all wrong, you guys. Maybe the generic vote is wrong. For those who don't understand, a generic vote is across the entire country, not looking at specific congressional districts, but just overall. Like they call 2,000 people from Maine to California to Hawaii, you know, and they say, you know, left or right. Okay, that's what the generic vote is. So that it's not very precise. But we've seen with the nomination of Brett Kavanaugh, and I'm just going to express my personal opinion. I mean, you know, what did Michelle Obama says, when they go low, we go high. Well, the left is going really low right now. That may tick some people off, okay? Donald Trump is a brute, okay? Fine. We all knew that when he was elected, okay? There's nothing new there. But the Democrats are showing their really nasty side. Oh, they took a few pages from the Frankfurt School.
Alexander, what do you think? Red or blue?
It's very difficult for me to say because, I mean, I don't have my finger on the American pulse to the extent that Peter does, for example. I mean, I'm not American. But
Alex, what do you think? Alex Christoforou, what do you think?
Yeah.
What do I think? I think that they will, real quick, I think they will lose the House, but they will keep the Senate. That's what I think. But I also think that a lot of this going low stuff may mobilize the Trump voters.
I think so too. We'll see. Now, can I just say one thing, which is that I have never seen ever the stops being pulled out so much by the Democrats to really swing this against Trump and the Republicans in November. And my own feeling is that apart from Trump, the Republicans are not putting up the kind of fight that perhaps they should be putting up if they really want to counter the Democrats to the extent that they should. That's how it looks to me from the distance that I am sitting. It seems to me that it's Trump versus the Democrats rather than the Republican Party versus the Democrats.
Good point. Very good point.
Good point. All right, 550 people now. Wow. Thanks, guys, for joining us. Vicky G gave us $9.99, $9.99 on a super chat. She says, thank you all. Thank you, Vicky, for the super chat. And we got another €5 super chat from Boundless Energy. Peter, will we see a war in Europe and a possible battlefield in Germany?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I hear that Germans are in talks with Bolton and people like that to be part of some kind of coalition of the willing in Syria. But the Germans have to check if their 3 planes work. So they'll get back to Bolton. All right. Germany it would be an auxiliary role in any kind of military conflict. I mean, you really have to give it to the Germans. They really took the results of the Second World War to heart. I mean, militarism is dead in Germany, okay? It really is. People don't want to join the military. They don't see it as a respectable lifestyle and career. So I don't see that. What I could see, and Alexander's probably much closer to it, the Balkans are brewing, okay? And it's because of the illegal destruction of the state of Yugoslavia. It's still festering, and it's not going to get any better because too many outside forces are still involved in it. It's, again, as I say on Crosstalk, you know, another example of the law of unintended consequences. You guys in Washington and the think tanks, you didn't think it through, did you? You never do.
Yeah. Can I just say, I mean, I also happen to know Germany pretty well. I mean, I travel there often. I think if Merkel actually decides to join a attack on Syria, led by the United States, there will be a very, very strong reaction against it in Germany. I mean, Peter is absolutely right. The German people I mean, this is a very anti-militaristic society now. Lots of people in Germany would be horrified. I do not think there's going to be a war in Germany. I don't think there's going to be a war anywhere in Europe except in 2 places. First, the Balkans. Peter is absolutely right. War in the Balkans is a very high probability. In fact, I would say it is a racing certainty eventually, because the situation there is so unstable. The other place where there is a war, and it is going on all the time, and we must never forget this, is in Ukraine. There is a continuing conflict in Ukraine. People are being killed on the front line in eastern Ukraine almost every day. And I was reading again that there were reports that the Ukrainian military has repositioned 90 heavy artillery pieces near the border with these republics which have broken away from Ukraine. There is always the danger of war in Ukraine flaring up, but even when it isn't being fought at a big level, it is always going on at a small level, and we must never forget this.
And what we have to keep in mind too is that the Russian side has made it clear that the Lugansk and Donetsk will not fall.
Exactly.
And with the help of the United States and NATO. That means, and Alexander's right, when we have this new military hardware being sold, I guess, you know, Ukraine has money for that, but it doesn't have money for electricity. Russia will match it, and Russia is on the border. It sees everything, every movement. They know exactly where everything is. So if Poroshenko, with single digits in the popularity polls, if he wants to pick a fight, well, you'll get one.
Absolutely.
Right. Approaching 600 viewers now. From Ziekmetsky at the Duran, Alex, why should the Turks believe that Cyprus will stay as Cypriot and not Greek in 20 years if there is a deal for Cyprus? Didn't Cyprus previously prove that they can't stay just Cypriot? Alexander.
Well, I think people who ask that question are probably not very familiar with Cyprus and with Greece and Cyprus and with the history. Cyprus is very different from Greece. Obviously, there are similarities. I mean, there are Greek Cypriots and there are Greeks in Greece, but it has evolved in such a very different way that I think this whole issue of enosis, of union between Greece and Cyprus, is really gone. And I don't think anybody anywhere now, either in Cyprus or in Greece, desires it, and I don't think anybody in Turkey fears it. So I don't think this is the issue anymore, and I don't think this is what the conflict is about anymore. That is a historic issue going back to the 50s and 60s. We've evolved far beyond that. I think that's my view anyway. I mean, I don't know what Alex thinks.
Yeah, I mean, just step foot in Limassol, which is pretty much half Russian to begin with, and you see how it's evolved. Cyprus is definitely it's a melting pot. It reminds me a lot of the U.S. in those respects. Yeah. You have a lot of people from everywhere, and they all live in harmony, as would the northern part as well. Once it does get resolved, which it needs to get resolved. Peter, super chat for 20 NOK. What's your view on 9/11?
My view on 9/11 is that we don't know everything that happened. I think people on Crosstalk have noticed that I say the events of 9/11 and kind of leave it at that. I think there should be another investigation. It should be opened up. We do know it. What's it, that 19-page document that has been kept secret about Saudi involvement and probably other foreign intelligence agencies. My position is we don't know the full truth. I mean, the third building fell by itself, apparently. I mean, these things need to be answered. I'm not generating a conspiracy theory here. I'm just saying we need some more transparency. And I think that, you know, once we got more transparency, we could make better assessments. And I think I kind of leave it at that. I don't have a conspiracy theory.
All right, another super chat from Jonathan Bethune. Enjoy your points of view. Thanks. Thank you. From Milos, another super chat for 50 NOK. No question. Thank you, Milos. From Henry Morgan, a $10 super chat. Aloha from Hawaii. No hurricanes today. That's good. Aloha, good. Henry. And we have another. I'm scrolling down, guys. We got a lot of chats coming in. Let's see. Everyone's saying to like our page. Yes, like our page. We got a super chat from Feder Strat for £9.99. Cents? Is it cents, Alexander? $9.99?
Yeah.
Okay. And Alexander, I don't know if you've mentioned the American soldiers apparently trapped in Idlib. How convenient. What were they doing mixed up with tens of thousands of terrorists?
Well, I think that's a question that should be addressed to the people in Washington, to the Pentagon and to the CIA and to all those people. The reality is that the United States has had all kinds of people all over Syria for a very long time. There are British people all over Syria, and they've been involved.
And French people.
And French also. And by the way, the Russians know exactly where all these people are. They made that very clear in the past. There was even a report some years ago that I think it was in 2016 when the US Air Force bombed a Syrian military position, that the Russians retaliated by bombing a place in Syria where they knew there were American controllers working. I don't know whether that is true, by the way, but it was very widely reported, and some people thought that it probably was true. So the fact is, we have had a war in Syria in which lots of people have been involved. It is not just a civil war, it's not even primarily a civil war.
A proxy international
war. It is a proxy international war. And there are advisors from all the countries that have been organizing and orchestrating that war. Some of them are in Idlib, where some of these proxies are still based. And that is why they are there.
All right. Milos, who donated previously the 50 NOK, has a question on Serbia and the war there. The EU, and he says, EU High Representative denied Serb war victims that were too much talk about Srebrenica and framing Serbs with it as genocide. Any thoughts on that, Peter?
Well, I don't know all the ins and outs of that case, but it's very clear from the European Union and their legal apparatus that Serbs are only war criminals. They were never victims in that conflict. You know, it's always been very, very one-sided. I mean, look at the people that run Albania right now. I mean, former accused of war crimes, and you know, the rank hypocrisy of their approach to dealing with Serbia and Bosnia and Herzegovina, how they deal with it. They're really way out of step with time. There are so many political facts on the ground right now. But if you're a Serb outside of Serbia, apparently you don't have any human rights whatsoever. Okay, that is European Union and American hypocrisy. Okay, remember when Barack Obama said, "Well, the referendum result in Kosovo." Hey, Barry, there was never a referendum, but there was one in Crimea. Okay. These people just don't have any facts. They just have opinions, and they're very prejudiced.
Alexander.
Can I just add, I mean, what Peter says is absolutely right, that the Serbs have been set up very inappropriately and completely absurdly as the perpetrators of the Yugoslav war, when in fact they were the people who were trying to hold Yugoslavia together. That was what actually happened. That was the reality of that conflict. And if you want to get a real forensic analysis of how this legal system, this legal machinery that Peter was talking about was used, the best place to go is to look at the trial of Slobodan Milosevic. What very few people realize is that the prosecution against him collapsed. Nearly all the charges that were brought against him were withdrawn. And this was despite the fact that every conceivable legal device and protection was stripped from him during the trial. And of course, rather than let him defend himself and bring a defense case against him, he was in the end denied medical treatment and he died. Now, if you want to get a good forensic account of all of that, there's a brilliant book by John Laughlin, I think a friend of Peter's. I'm not absolutely sure of that, but I think he's somebody Peter knows very well. He has done a brilliant dissection of it, and it is going on all the time. I mean, the whole tribunal that was set up in The Hague has basically been an attempt by the Western powers, by the European Union, first and foremost, to try to blame the Yugoslav wars on the Serbs, when those wars were actually waged against the Serbs. That was what it was all about.
And Serbia was protecting Serbs, okay, because of the patchwork of the state of Yugoslavia. John Laughlin's name was brought up, and I wanted to say that anything he writes, you come across his name, please read. He was a staunch supporter of Brexit, had him on the program many, many times. And John Laughlin's this very dour guy, doesn't smile very much. He's very stiff. He's very, very British. And the day Brexit passed, we had him on the program, and for the first time, and I've known him for many, many years, he had a smile from ear to ear, and he was ecstatic, okay? I mean, for this very demure, very reserved British, Englishman, he could have been wearing a bowler. He was quite jovial. It's a good program to take a look back on.
All right, Peter, well, I'll stay with you then on another super chat for 5 Canadian. Will Brexit ever happen, and will the EU eventually collapse? Peter, and then Alexander.
Let me go to Alexander because that's his country here.
All right, let's go to Alexander. Give me a quick take, Peter.
What you have to do is the elites have to decide something. Do they believe in the democratic process or not? Okay, because I truly believe they don't. I think it's a cover. Okay, but they manufacture consent. All right, they manufacture it. They manipulate it, okay? And they hit a brick wall, okay? Brexit and Trump, the elites hit a brick wall. All of their shenanigans, all of their money, all their lying, and they still didn't get the result they wanted. They're dumbfounded by this. They have to accept it, or the entire idea of a Western-style democracy is in tatters. Alexander.
Yeah, I mean, I think we just got it actually basically correct. I think, do they believe in democracy? Well, the reaction to the Brexit referendum shows, I think, perfectly clearly that they only believe in a democracy that gives them the outcome they want. They don't believe in any other kind of democracy. Now, I think ultimately what is going to happen is that they understand that there would be a huge crisis of legitimacy, major political crisis, if they simply set this referendum aside, even through the device of a second referendum, and don't have Brexit. But what they are trying to do, what the game plan is at the moment in Britain, is to drain Brexit of all meaning. In other words, have a kind of phony Brexit, where Britain leaves the European Union but continues to be integrated in its structures to the greatest degree possible. Now, why the British elite wants that to such an extent, that's another question. But I think that is what they're going to try and do. The point is, it is not going to be the end of the story, even if they achieve that. It is going to create more political conflict and more political polarization further down the line, and it is going to undermine the legitimacy of the political system even further. But these people don't seem to want to understand that, and they don't seem to be prepared.
Well, the elites, they want you to believe that a girl can be kind of a virgin, not completely. What's just going to be the smoke and mirrors? They're going to twist words and completely ignore the democratic will of the people. Okay, it's very, I watched the Brexit campaign. It was very, very transparent. I didn't always agree with their arguments. I didn't, because I thought a lot of their arguments were very neoliberal, which is an ideology I'm dead set against. Okay, but it happened. Okay, it happened.
All right.
Yes, and I mean, and it was just quickly. I mean, it was absolutely clear that if people voted for Brexit, Britain would leave the European Union. I mean, David Cameron said the very next day after the result, he would invoke Article 50. He said it very clearly. There's no two ways about it. That was what people were voting for.
Yeah, well, he's a coward. He's simply a political coward, a prostitute. That's all he was.
Exactly.
Okay. Then he would invoke it, and what did he do? He hung around for what, 3 more months? Sucking on the fat of the land. I mean, he was humiliated. He should have the next day invoked it and got the hell out of Dodge.
Absolutely, absolutely. But he didn't want Boris Johnson to become prime minister, not because Boris Johnson
he created his own mess.
Yeah,
he never had to call for a referendum. That fool! What a buffoon he was.
Well, of course he was. Of course he was. Absolutely.
All right, we got a $2 super chat from J. Dixon Brown. Alexander, what's your outlook on Syria in 5 years?
Right, I feel fairly optimistic about Syria, actually. I think, as I said, I think Idlib will be part of Syria again fairly soon. I think that there will be a deal done with the Kurds. I think the Americans will be thrown out. I think there will be some kind of decentralization, but I think Syria will remain a single state. And I predict that it will recover economically much faster than people expect. That is my own view. We will see actually, I think, a stronger, more self-confident Syria coming out of all of this, with a lot of people in Syria saying, you know, we stood up to this huge attack that was delivered against our country, and we got something to be proud of. And when people feel pride in their country, things tend to happen quite well and quite fast. So in 5 years' time, I think we should be a strong, peaceful, stable Syria. That's my view.
I think a lot of Syrians, I think, will come back home. They've been forced out. I think they want to come back. I agree with Alexander Mercouris. It's been talked about off and on ever since this artificial international proxy war was started for no good reason whatsoever. That there will be a decentralization, there'll be political reforms, but those will be reforms agreed to by the Syrian people, not by the outsiders, and particularly not the United States.
All right. Reagan Caucasian says that we missed the super chat question on 9/11 directed at Peter. No, we did not miss it. He says, what a coincidence. No, Peter answered it. You can take a look at the video. If we did miss another super chat question, which I don't think we missed, just send it down below and we'll try to address it. But I think we got all the super chat questions, including the 9/11 one. Someone wants to know, what's the meaning of the Duran and the crest? The meaning of the Duran, we won't explain it just yet. But the crest, yes, the crest is a Russian symbol. It's an Orthodox symbol. It's a Greek symbol. But more importantly, what we like about the double-headed eagle, aside of all of that, is that it faces east and west. And so it covers a lot of, it symbolizes covering a lot of what's going on in the world. And that's what we try to do, as you guys see in these live streams.
Let me chime in on this here. This is a conspiracy of these two Greek guys. I'm not in. I wasn't involved in this. Okay, I was just simply outvoted. Okay, I was outvoted. And I said okay, but I'm waiting for the answer too.
Well, there it is. We tried to answer as well, but the Duran one, we'll answer that one day. That's for sure. Let's scroll down. We got more than 600 people here on this chat. And guys, you can also donate to our PayPal page and buy a shirt as well. Someone says that Crosstalk rules, their favorite show. Yes, it does. From give it a plug. From Pastelakis, K, could you explain why Russia does not kick out Turkey from Syria, since Russia is fighting for Syria? We've answered a lot of Syria, but Alexander.
Yeah, I think what the point is that the Russians are not going to kick Turkey out of Syria. Firstly, because they need Turkey to help them stabilize Syria, but also because they want to have good relations with Turkey. They do not want to have an enemy of Turkey. So they don't want to have a massive smash with the Turks in Syria. When they're building economic links with Syria, they're building a pipeline with Syria, when they've got all sorts of Russian tourists traveling to Syria, and where Russia is rapidly becoming the biggest investor in the Turkish economy. So we've got all of these things to play with, which the Russians have been playing very skillfully indeed. If you think about it, they went into Syria, they did the opposite of what the Turks wanted to see in Syria. They held it together. Turkish policy was to break Syria up, to achieve regime change there. The Russians stopped that, and yet they managed to remain friends with Turkey. That is a very remarkable diplomatic achievement, and probably only the Russians could have done it.
And the thing is, too, is that remember before Erdogan, what was Turkey's foreign policy? They had a nice little phrase. I hope I get it right. No problems with neighbors foreign policy, that they wanted to resolve all of the issues with their neighbors. It was very, it was really a quite remarkable goal to have. But that's what Russia's foreign policy is. If you're willing in good faith to sit down and talk, we might not be able to fix everything. We can fix some things. It was like the entire approach to the international community, and I hate using that term, because I don't want to have a lot of extra words here, but dealing with Iran. Okay, the U.S. and Israel and UK, you know, and maybe the Europeans, they had other issues to deal with the Iranians, but they could solve this one. And that could have started a demonstration effect to start solving other problems. Trump's whole approach to Iran is just ridiculous. Well, what about those missiles? But that wasn't the agreement. The agreement was on the nuclear program, right? So when it comes to Syria, Alexander McPherson is absolutely right, is that Russia doesn't want to turn Turkey into an enemy. It can at least be a regional partner, maybe not a friend, but a regional partner.
All right, Alex Alexander sent us a super chat for $19.99. Says look into Genie oil in Golan Heights, Syria. Not sure if that's a question or a comment, but thanks, Alex, for that super chat. And if there's a question attached to it,
so the Israelis are fronting the really oil and gas in
Golan Heights.
Correct. Absolutely, yeah.
But Alexander also says, Peter, I like Crosstalk too. Excellent show, Peter. And Pamela Peel says, you guys are great. Thank you very much, Pamela. And we have a 50 NOK super chat from Milos. Let me get that up. Thoughts on Bosnia and Herzegovina, why the EU is pushing 3 confronted sides in little Yugoslavia again. Why is this artificial state still in life? Alexander.
Well, I mean, you're quite right. I mean, it is an artificial state because there has never been a real existent Bosnian state before this one. And of course, it's the old story. It's trying to weaken Serbia. It is trying to keep Bosnia as a sort of satellite of the EU and of NATO, bringing it into NATO, of keeping Serbia, which is seen as somehow pro-Russian, as weak as possible. And of course, it is creating problems. It's creating problems within Bosnia. It's creating problems within the whole of the Balkans. And sooner or later, if this policy continues, it will lead to a blow up. And can I just say something? The geopolitical situation in the world today is very different from what it was in the 1990s. If there is a blow up in the Balkans, it will not be a situation which the Western powers can simply go in and do what they want. It will be much harder for them this time. And who knows, we could be seeing another debacle there, another Western debacle there. But you asked me why they're putting all this pressure on Bosnia. Well, that's the reason.
Peter, can you go back to Alex Alexander's question on the Golan Heights and just elaborate a little bit more about Israel's involvement in the Golan Heights?
Well, I mean, Israel has been occupying the Golan Heights. It's part of Syria. It's recognized as part of Syria. The Israelis say they've annexed it, but they're the only people that agree to that. Okay, it's not, no other power that I'm aware of is recognized the illegal seizure. And it was annexation is the capture of land through the use of force. So that doesn't apply to Crimea. There's oil and gas in the Golan, and of course they want to deprive the Syrian state of that. And so they get Western companies investing money. They have political power. They'll turn a blind eye to the illegal occupation there because they want money. So the Israelis are playing this ploy right here, and it will make it even more difficult for other countries to nudge Israel out of Golan. I don't think Golan is going to be part of Syria for a very, very long time, unfortunately. But the international law just turns a blind eye to it. It's an illegal occupation. Turkey's occupation of Cyprus is illegal too, but that's never mentioned at all. Okay, it's because these countries are aligned with the West. Okay, it's hypocrisy. There's always hypocrisy.
All right, another question for Peter and Alex, and I'm going to say something before you guys get to it. MediaBiasFactCheck.com describes the Duran as, and I quote, propaganda, right-wing bias, questionable source. Top results on Google. CNN comes out with flying colors. How do Alex and Peter respond to this? I think you answered the question. If you go to MediaBiasFactCheck.com, which I have gone, and you type in Washington Post and New York Times, they do say they're reliable sources. So I think everyone here on this chat is intelligent enough to know that the Washington Post and the New York Times and CNN are anything but reliable sources. But they want to know, Peter, Alexander, what are your thoughts on how they categorize the Duran?
I'll go real quick because it's so simple to me. It's that these alleged fact checkers They are just instruments of traditional legacy media that wants their monopoly back. They're the only ones that can speak the truth. They know the truth. Okay? No, they don't. No, they don't. They've been shown to be serial liars in doing it at the behest of their benefactors. Okay? You know, the saying that CNN is reliable, the New York Times are reliable. I mean, that was a long, long time ago. I think the last time it was maybe the Pentagon Papers in 1971.
Alexander.
Well, I mean, exactly. I mean, we don't publish, for example, anonymous articles by the kind of articles that now get published by the New York Times. We don't write a whole book like Bob Woodward's book, in which is full of quotes of people, which is, if you go to that book, I mean, it's full of quotes, which he can't possibly have heard. And he's obviously making up, I mean, he's making up many of them. And yet he and the New York Times and the Washington Post are supposed to be the reliable sources, and we are not. Well, we don't pretend that we are a company with the kind of resources that they have. We don't have reporters all over the world. We make mistakes from time to time. We try to correct them. We're honest about when we correct mistakes. If you go to our site, you can see that we've actually retracted stories and apologized to our readers and our viewers when we've made mistakes. I stand completely by what we do. I think we are a fully honest channel and a fully honest site. And frankly, I think that our record speaks for itself. And
on top of it, in all of our live chats, none of it is scripted. None of it. I don't have any talking points. Alexander Mercouris doesn't have any. Alexander Christoforou didn't say, remember to say this, remember to say that. It never happens. I can't even do it. Okay? I just do everything on the fly. That's my nature.
Yeah. All right. Yes, absolutely. And I think the breadth of knowledge that you guys have is pretty stunning, because we get a lot of questions on a lot of different topics, and we knock them out of the ballpark as best as we could. And a little off topic, Peter, your dog is adorable. What's his or her name?
That's he's a Chihuahua. His name is Buddy, and he's about 9 months old.
All right. Stella wants to know, don't you think the war in Syria is there for a bigger plan of globalization, a cover for getting more immigrants into Europe? Basically her question. Alexander.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't think that was the original plan. I'm sure that was not the original plan. I think the original plan was to smash up Syria, to replace the secular government there with various jihadi groups, reduce the influence of Iran, do all of these things. And of course, what happened was that they created this war in Syria that led to refugee flows. Their ideology in Europe means that they felt obliged to welcome these people, and it has triggered the backlash in Europe that they didn't expect and didn't want, and which they are unprepared for. As I say, I don't think that was the plan, but that's been the result.
Yeah, it is, again, the law of unintended consequences in play here. I would, Alexander Mercouris mentioned Duran. I would also throw in Hezbollah. So, and you can help, you know, what country is always obsessed about those two, and that's the state of Israel.
All right, Peter, I'll stay with you. With Miel Rodriguez wants to know, is Obama trying to protect his own arse? I guess he's saying with the British, with the British accent.
Well, I mean, the thing is that his DOJ and FBI, it's all being exposed how corrupt they are. And so you kind of have to ask the question, go back to Iran-Contra with Ronald Reagan. I don't know who said it, but, you know, what did he know and when did he know it? So if he didn't know anything, then what was he doing in the Oval Office? And if he did know something, what was it and when and who told you? It's unraveling all of this, and it's getting closer and closer to his Oval Office. Okay. And the second point is there any Obama legacy left? And I fault Donald Trump for being too obsessed about that. Okay. There are real problems out there. What he's done is to completely unravel Barack Obama's presidency. And he's almost done it. I mean, because we have to remember, how did Barack Obama rule? He ruled through executive order. You know, he couldn't get anything through Congress. So, and I blame the Republicans for that. You know, this obstructionist thing, the Democrats are doing it now. So it's a bit hypocritical of the Republicans to be, oh, you're obstructionists, okay? They were too. This is the dysfunctionality that's going on here. So Obama ruled through executive order. Well, Trump, all he has to do is basically just cross it out. It's done, okay? So I don't think Barack Obama has any legacy to be proud of at all. I think he was one of the worst presidents of the United States. He was just a placeholder for the deep state and other interests. He's a vain, narcissistic person, and he's showing it all over again. Okay, he went to South Africa. Did he speak about white farmers being murdered? Did he say anything about that? No, he didn't. So he doesn't speak for anyone except for his selfish interests.
Yep. He does have a very big ego. We are approaching 650 viewers. Guys, thanks for joining the chat. Don't forget, send us a super chat. We will try to answer the super chats and all questions on the chat. Also donate to our PayPal page and also buy a shirt from the Duran shop. We have great products there. You will definitely like them. Alexander from Susan, what is the danger of Montenegro being part of NATO? George Soros and the NWO, the New World Order, is involved?
Well, I mean, Montenegro is a tiny country. I mean, it adds absolutely nothing to NATO. It is not a threat to Russia. Let us be very clear about that. But what it is doing, what the West is trying to do, what NATO is trying to do, is it is trying to scoop up the Balkans. It's trying to get all the various parts of the Balkans into NATO to bring them within the US-NATO system. And what it is doing, trying to do, what it is achieving by trying to do that, is that it is destabilizing the Balkans. We now have a crisis in Macedonia. We've spoken already about the problems in Bosnia. We spoke at the last live chat that we did last week about Kosovo. And of course, Montenegro itself, which is a country with long historic links, very close historic links to Russia. A lot of people aren't happy about it there either, and there are problems with the government there. So rather than leave the situation to try and stabilize by itself and helping the forces of stabilization, they're taking the situation and they're making it worse.
And one other thing they want to do, why Montenegro? I mean, New York City has a larger police force than the entire Montenegrin army, okay? Yeah. Think about that. Yeah. But what the U.S. wants to do, and Brexit screwed it all up, those Trumpy Britons, okay? They screwed it all up because what they want to do is they want to have NATO and the EU as being a seamless whole. And that gives the United States the advantage of a back door to be able to get their fingertips on everything inside the European Union and NATO. So they want it to be seamless, where it's a bloc. It's completely under Washington's control. Even little Montenegro, this is how possessed they are. They must have everything, all. You cannot let one person out. And then those elites in Montenegro are tied into the Western elites, into the Washington consensus. So, oh, okay, we're going to go to war with Iran. How many people can you cough up being a good NATO member and a member of the European Union? You know, that's how they play this thing here, okay? And everybody, coughs up, the Georgians are not even in either one of them. They went to Afghanistan to do latrine duty for the empire, okay? That's how they work, okay? That's how they work.
All right, 744748 wants to know, would anyone from the panel agree that Russia is trying to entice the U.S. into a second arms race?
No.
Peter, yes.
Not at all. Not at all. Look at the new weaponry that Putin announced a few months ago. They're all defensive against the arms race that Donald Trump is stirring up. Okay? Look at the national intelligence reports that come out, these what do they call them? Posture reports. I think 3 of them have come out under Trump. They target China and Russia and Iran. Those 3 countries have a right to defend themselves. They are targeted. It is U.S. official policy that they deem Russia, Iran, and China as military security threats. So if someone calls you a threat, you're going to arm yourself and protect yourself. Russia does not want, as a matter of fact, just the opposite. Russia, Putin, I'm sure, and Helsinki was saying, Donald, come on, The START agreement and other arms control agreements are coming to an end. We have to sit down and start talking about that. This is an imperative, a very serious imperative.
Alexander.
Yes, I agree with everything that Peter said. I would add something else. I actually heard Putin himself talk about this. I think Peter was there also. This was at SPIEF, the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, in 2016. And he said very clearly, the reason why we are moving forward to develop our own counter systems, of course, he didn't say at that time what those counter systems were going to be, but we are developing those counter systems, because in the early period of the George W. Bush administration, the Bush administration pulled out of the anti-ballistic missile treaty. It started implanting ballistic missile interceptors in Eastern Europe against agreements that had been reached previously. It started to try and draw former states of the Soviet Union into NATO, again, contrary to agreements that had been made previously with the Soviet Union and with Russia. And in light of all of that, we had to respond, and we are responding. It is not our choice. It is what we have to do in order to defend ourselves and to protect our sovereignty. And that is Russian policy, and they will always, if they can, come to some kind of mutually beneficial and secure agreement with the United States so that they can concentrate on where their real focus is, which is on their own internal development. I've heard Putin say all of that. He said it very clearly. I've heard other Russians say that. I've heard Russian military people say that. And I am sure it is true.
All right, Peter, this is connected.
And sadly, Trump wants to militarize space now.
Yeah.
Go.
All right.
You want arms control on the Earth, and now you want to militarize space. Wow.
Space Force.
What could go wrong?
Peter, George Barber wants to know, can we comment on the decline of the U.S. hegemony? And on a related question, Peter, do you think, from Red Fibershard, do you think America is an empire? So American hegemony and U.S. empire.
Of course it's an empire, okay? Obviously it is, okay? And what holds that empire together is not the military, it's the US dollar and financial institutions. And now the Trump administration is using financial institutions and the dollar as a political weapon. Big mistake, big mistake. A currency, to have value, you must have trust in it. But if it's going to turn into a political weapon, you delude that trust. What the Trump administration is very, very dangerous. Other countries will start trading in their current. It's already happening. It's accelerating. And those dollars that are not being used otherwise are going to go back to the U.S. Inflation, folks, a lot of it. Hegemony. The unipolar moment is closing. This is why we see this erratic foreign policy coming out of the deep state. They're terrified. They're terrified that the unipolar moment is coming to an end, and they can't conceive of a world without the unipolar moment now. That has been exhibited for the last 25 years. There's no diplomatic initiatives anymore. It's just, we threaten you, we bribe you, or we'll kill you. Like, I'm sorry to be so blunt, but that's the way it is. All right. So they're terrified of losing their hegemonic moment in the unipolar moment after the end of the Cold War. And it's happening, and there's nothing the U.S. can do to stop it. Nothing.
All right. We got a super chat for 2 Canadian from Ian Schofield. No question, but Lane or Ian Schofield. Thank you, though, for the super chat. And we have 3 questions from Bruno. I'm going to connect them all together, 3 separate ones. One's a comment. He says Jimmy Dore should be on this panel. Yeah,
I love Jimmy.
That would be cool to have him on. And then he asks, what do you guys think about the call to peace that Putin has made to Japan? And his follow-up question was, will we get a peace treaty signed till the end of the year?
Well, we're not going to get a peace treaty signed by the end of the year. The Japanese have rejected Putin's offer. I think it would be very difficult for them simply to agree. But I think we will get a peace treaty, and it will be on Russian terms, because Japan actually is becoming isolated in the Northeast Pacific in ways that I think aren't immediately visible, because China North Korea, South Korea, and Russia are going to be moving increasingly together, and I think the Japanese will not want to be left out of that.
Is a big question. The Philippines is a big question mark.
Yeah, but that is a different part of the Pacific, Peter. It's further south. Whereas it is in the Northeast Pacific, where Japan is, as I said, where it isn't in Japan's interests to be locked out of what is happening on the Korean Peninsula, in the Russian Far East, and in China. So I think there will be a peace treaty, and I think it will be on Russian terms. The Russians will not, as we'd said before, they will look to try to help Japan preserve face. They always try and do that. So they will look for compromises, but it will not be the handover of the islands that the Japanese have been demanding that the Russians make. That isn't going to happen. And I think that's just not realistic anymore.
I agree with Alexander Mercouris. They want to formalize the sovereignty of those islands to Russia, but there's a lot else that can be done. A lot of sweeteners, investment, access to it, compensation, all kinds of things can be done here where the Japanese can say, well, we got something out of this, something that we didn't have before. And I think Alexander Mercouris is absolutely right. You know, with what's going on with the talks between the two Koreas, which is so very important. Everybody talks about Trump and all that in Korea. No, it's about the Koreans and the Chinese, the Japanese, I'm sorry. They see this, the Koreas coming together, and that's something that they're not very comfortable with. I mean, the Koreans don't like the Japanese very much for obvious reasons, okay? And then with some kind of united Korea, it's going to definitely be much more pro-China than it's going to be pro-US, okay? Because once you end the official hostilities on the Korean Peninsula, there's an obvious question that's asked. Then, if there's no state of war, then why are American troops there?
Exactly.
And the Japanese, they see this.
Peter from Zuma, are Russians happy with their economy? How fast is Putin improving the lives of Russians? And are there, 3 questions he has, and are there blacks in politics in Russia?
There are no blacks in politics that I'm aware of. There are some blacks that mulattoes, I think you would call them, where there was a mixed marriage, and there a number of, I guess they're Africa Russians. Okay, no one ever says that term, but there's certainly people of that characterization. You know, there's a lot of foreign medical students, like from Nigeria and Ghana and other places like that, that they come and study here. What was the other one? Oh, the economy.
Are they happy? Are they happy? And how fast is Putin moving with?
There's frustration. No doubt about it. There's frustration. The sanctions do hurt to some degree, not to the degree that the West believes they are. As a matter of fact, the Western sanctions against Russia have hurt the West twice as much as it's hurt Russia. So they've shot themselves in the foot. Now, there's estimates here. I think it's a fair estimate. Alexander Mercouris might have a different one, but it's about 1.7% growth. Considering the economic environment, the U.S. Interest in sanctioning the whole world, it creates a lot of economic uncertainty. There's a lot of uncertainty about the future of the World Trade Organization if the U.S. doesn't want to remain in it. And they always have to worry about oil prices when it comes to the Middle East. But I would say frustration, and I'll tell you why. I mean, I know a lot of 20-somethings because of RT and all that, a lot of young people, and they've gotten used to having the good life, okay? And they like it, and they want more of it. And if you have an economy that's growing at 1.7%, it's frustrating, definitely frustrating. But overall, Putin's management of the economy has been very good. Particularly, this is the 10th anniversary of the financial meltdown. One thing I'll tell you, the Russian government has done, and with Putin was behind it, don't get out of this toxic foreign Western financial system. Russia is prepared. The next shock, it's not going to be hit like before. Russia was very exposed to Western because of what used to be called the oligarchs, big businessmen here. They drank the Kool-Aid, cheap credit, and they took it in foreign currencies. In this country, we have rubles. So if the ruble crashes, you still have to pay your loans in foreign currency. That means you have to pay a lot more of your own domestic currency to pay off your loans. Putin has told them, don't get stuck into that situation again, because we're not going to bail you out. We're not. Okay, we're not going to.
Alexander, you want to comment real quick?
Yeah, just a few things. I mean, what Peter says is absolutely right. I mean, I think for the Russians, for the Russian government at least, the two seminal events was the economic crash of 1998 and the economic crash of 2008. And they do not want to repeat that. There is absolute determination on the part, exactly, on the part of the government and of the economic leadership, that they are not going to, they're going to restructure the Russian economy to insulate it from those kind of crises again. That means not borrowing on international money markets. That means running very, very tight fiscal policies. That means running very, very tight monetary policies. That means cleaning up the banking system. That means bringing down inflation. That means doing all of these things. Now, the trade-off, if you're going to do all of that, is that you have to accept a period of slower growth. And yes, that is frustrating to people who had become used to, before 2008, see their incomes, their real incomes grow at a rate of 10% a year. They're not growing at that rate now, and they won't grow at that rate for some time. But I am quite certain that come the 2020s, you're going to start seeing all of these things that are being done now start to bear fruit. I've written about this many times, by the way, and others have too. And when that happens, you'll start to see growth pick up, living standards will rise. And can I just say something? If you go to Russia, I think we will, all three of us agree with this, living standards are pretty high now. Compared to a lot of other places, they're very high. I mean, people are not doing badly.
And on top of it, a new strategy, and other BRIC countries are doing it as well, is that there's plenty of money in Russia. They need to start borrowing internally, okay? Exactly. Get out of the city of London, get off of Wall Street. That is just toxic, okay? Nothing has been fixed since 2008 in the West. No, you're just pumping a system that has plenty of holes in it. Okay, quantitative easing is just an illusion. Okay, and Russia is determined not to get stuck into that trap again, because it got burned. Okay, it really did.
All right, AJ says all fiats eventually fail, and Ksenia from Russia says, "Hey from Russia." Hello, Ksenia. And Space Cat wants to hear something in Greek. Yasu Space Cat Tiganis. Steve Stadley sent us a super chat for $20 to both of you guys. Let's see. I believe war between Russia and the US is inevitable, if not imminent. Convince me that this is not true.
Well, I don't believe it's true, because it would be mutual destruction, indefinite. See what happened? What's wrong with Western policymakers is that they think that if you can just sit down with someone, they'll convince you to agree with them. And the Russians say, no, we think differently. We have different interests, and you're going to have to put up with us. Okay, we're here. Now, we're willing to work with you. You have to work with us. And I know that the high military officials in the Pentagon, they know going toe-to-toe with Russia in a major military conflict, no one will win. No one will win at all. So I don't think it's imminent. There is a war going on now, and it is through using the dollar as a weapon, the sanctions, putting people on lists. See, it's an attempt to slay your opponent through 1,000 slashes. And the thing is that Russia learned. You got to remember, the Soviet Union was sanctioned its entire existence by the West. Okay, so the Russians have come up with new strategy. They become much more innovative. Okay. And the thing is that what is the definition of a great power? One is make things and export things that people want. And I said this in our last podcast, is that never underestimate, and mark my words, 30, 40 years from now, we're not going to be talking about nuclear weapons. Hopefully we get rid of all of them, okay? But Russia has water and food, and the world dearly needs both. hydropower, food power. That is the future, and Russia's planning for that future. So no war between the two. And I'll pass it over to Alexander Mercouris. Just remember, I don't think the United States and Russia necessarily have to be friends. They don't have to be friends, but they don't need to be enemies.
I think it's all absolutely right, and I agree with everything Peter has just said. I just add a few points, which is that we see that in Syria, the illustration of the point that Peter is making, the US and Russian militaries there are cheek by jowl. They've been operating in the same theater. They've been going at completely different, backing completely different sides. The US military has been extremely careful not to take the Russians on up to now. And the reason is because the US military understands that if they do, they have a military superpower pitched against them, and they don't want to escalate that. And the reason we're seeing all these sanctions campaigns being launched against the Russians is because the United States knows perfectly well that the military option against Russia simply doesn't exist. As for the sanctions, well, I think it was Friedrich Paul Nietzsche who said, "That which does not break you makes you stronger." The sanctions are making Russia stronger. Takes time.
Western elites and politicians, and of course the stupid media, they believe their own propaganda.
Exactly.
Putin is just this far away from being overthrown. That is just pure nonsense.
Yeah, no, it's just absolute nonsense. Absolute nonsense. And
no one is thinking here. No one's talking about that here.
Yes, and what Peter said a short while ago about the Russians having more than enough resources and funds to finance and pursue their own development is true, and the sanctions have made it absolutely central to them and are ensuring that that is what is going to happen. They're going to organize their own financial system so that it is geared to promoting Russian economic development. So that is what they're going to do in the end. They're going to make Russia a more self-sufficient, a more stronger country, and that's the inevitable product of this kind of policy that we're seeing.
You know, the interesting thing is that, you know, everyone's talking about, you know, the chaos in Russia, politics, economics, and all that. Russia is looking at the West watching its chaos and doesn't want to get caught into it at all. All right. Russia doesn't have to stir up Black Lives Matter. Okay. I mean, the race issue was part of American history before Russia and the United States had diplomatic relations. Okay. I mean, the origins of the West's problems do not lay here in Russia. Far from it. I mean, from our perspective here, it's just farcical what people say.
All right, Peter, follow up on that real quick, because Ksenia asked a couple of questions, which people are talking about. She asked, what do you think about ordinary Russian people? And I'm going to summarize what she said, because she says her and her husband do not agree with many of Putin's policies.
Yes, and you and Alexander Mercouris did a whole podcast on the pension reform. Yeah, absolutely. People are very upset about that here. People are frustrated there isn't more economic growth. And it's about the Russians haven't the Russian government hasn't been able to crack it. I agree. Okay, at work, you know, when my team is completely of women, wonderful women that work with me, and they like to travel. And you know, when they check the exchange rate, and they say, I think we're going to stay in country during the winter holidays because it's too expensive to travel. Yeah, there's frustration about that, but that doesn't translate into a political attitude of major change. The thing is that Russia's been through so many major changes in modern history. People just say, no more revolutions. We need an evolutionary path, and we need a better path. Look, there are members of the Russian government that people hate because they say they're liberals, they're not thinking about the national interests of Russia. There's a huge internal debate on so many different topics. People are not happy with the changing curriculum in schools. They want more input on that. I know I'm talking about mundane things, but that's what life is all about, are these mundane things. So I understand the frustration, especially aspirational Russians, young aspirational Russians feel a sense of frustration. It's all true. But where isn't that frustration in the world today?
Agreed.
Truth is everything. Truth is everything.
Says, hi, Alexander.
Hi, Alexander. I'm in Mykonos.
I've got
reverb.
I don't know if you guys are hearing.
Yes, I can.
Okay, and guys, we're at
an hour
and 45 minutes, so we're gonna wrap this up. We'll take about another 5-10 minutes worth of questions. And let's see.
Let me ask our viewers a question here. What do you want us to talk about? So next week we can address them and we can think a little bit ahead. What do you want to hear more about? We're more than willing to get prepped up for you.
All right, just put those in the chat.
Put those in the chat.
Yeah, put those in the chat.
And Monkey Pushing Wood wants to know, do you see a scramble for resources by major powers? With the population hitting 11.2 billion by the end of the century.
Yeah, it's a continent and it starts with an A. Okay, Africa.
All right.
And I would also say the Chinese know all about it. It's when we look at the Asian Eurasian landmass. I mean, the Chinese they know what they're doing. Okay, this entire modernization of the Asian landmass for trade. This is what they're really focused in on, and they're spending tens and tens of billions of dollars building infrastructure. The U.S. is not doing that in the world. It creates bases. China is creating an infrastructure for global growth, and it's not just for China; it's for other people around the world.
I was actually going to make the same point. I mean, the Chinese policy, especially towards Russia, is about resources. They're looking at the Russians, and they realise that the Russians have China needs.
Yeah, but there's always been this danger, and the Russians are very aware of it. Is that they have the resources, and then they sell their resources. What they want something back for it. So the deal is, all right, we will, like our natural resources, we'll sell it to China, but you have to build infrastructure that we can use as well. There's a double benefit that way. It's kind of like, there was a few years ago, it was like over 10 years ago, there was a big beef with Finland, because Finland would buy Russian lumber, and there's a lot of trees in Russia, okay, a lot of them, and they would sell them to the Finns, and the Finns would process the wood and sell them for really cool furniture, and they would get like a 150, 300, 500% markup on their lumber, and the Russians say, nah, come on here. We can come out with a deal where we can be part of the end, the processing process in your country, where we both benefit from it. And I'll tell you, the Finns were terrified of that, but they did resolve it. Okay, Russia doesn't just want to be a mining operation for everyone else. They're very sensitive about that.
Absolutely.
All right, guys, we're getting a lot of echo. We've been at this for an hour 45. I think we're going to be wrapping this up. Thank you, everyone. I know you're hearing echo from me, but we're going to wrap it up, guys.
All righty. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching.
Thank you very much.
And thanks for the contributions.
Yeah.